Today in iFinance, we'll talk about Bitcoin and why it might actually go to 20K and beyond. Let's get to it. So today I'm thinking about Bitcoin and given the fact that it is recently breaking to new highs and it's visiting 10K, which is a price that it hasn't touched in a long while, it's making me think about how society is going to reflect on this moment a few years from now. You see, Bitcoin went mainstream in 2017, and that whole year it was all-time high after all-time high after all-time high. There were endless amounts of scams going on at the time, and a lot of people made a lot of money, and everybody was happy, and it was a bubble in every sense of the word. Nevertheless, at the time, everybody was talking about it. And I remember, because I've been following Bitcoin, believe it or not, I think before it was even, when it was around $10 per Bitcoin. And I followed it. I thought it was a cool idea. I thought the idea of having a decentralized currency that had every positive from normal currencies, but also the scarcity of gold and the conveniency of a credit card. I just thought that was revolutionary. But I always thought, at the same time, I always thought, well, I would buy it if it wasn't for the fact that anyone else can really make another cryptocurrency just like Bitcoin. That always stopped me from getting into the asset itself. I always thought, well, I could make my own Bitcoin. Anybody else can do it. And so even if the space as a whole grows, which I think it should, even if the space as a whole grows, then what you'll see is a bunch of different cryptocurrencies, but countless actually of them. None really working out as a phenomenal investment as you might expect. I remember they used to make YouTube videos that I think I was the only one watching. Nobody else paid attention to the asset at that time when it was $10 a share or something like that. And there was a few guys who were talking about, oh, Bitcoin is going to go to $100 and maybe a little bit further than that. I used to think these guys are high because I thought if at any point Bitcoin starts going up there, someone else is going to release another coin just like Bitcoin, and that's gonna be it. That's gonna be it. But it didn't happen. I mean, technically it did. A lot of other cryptocurrencies came up, but none actually worked out the same way Bitcoin worked out. The true value of Bitcoin comes down to mainly two aspects. And I think, obviously, there are other aspects. And there are other important aspects that you must also consider. But I think two main key points make Bitcoin valuable. Number one, and by the way, these two aspects, they make valuable any other currency. And you can think of it as the dollar or any other currency, whatever you might think of it. So the aspect number one is how many people are using it, how many people are transacting, but not measured necessarily in numbers of people, although that's important. I would say that this aspect is kind of two aspects in one. On one hand is how many people in one hand is how many people are actually transacting, buying and selling stuff on Bitcoins or the currency you might think of. But the other aspect of it that kind of is the same but it's not quite is how much in dollar terms or in value terms is that transacting going on. Or put differently is how much value is being transacted on that currency. So it's kind of the same, but it's not quite. It's just the amount of people on one hand, and the other one is how much value. But you can kind of put that one as one single reason. And the other one is scarcity, which is how easy it is to find this currency. The basic idea is the more common a currency is, then the less valuable it is. And in this sense, you can think of the typical inflation example where, say you have, and you can think of it any way you like. Say you're playing Monopoly in your family. Say there's 4 players, among them you, and each player has $1,000, and everything will be priced on the idea that there's only $4,000 Monopoly bucks, and everything is priced on that supposition, and that's fine. But imagine you start sneaking in more fake Monopoly bills into the game. You increase the supply from 4,000 to 40,000. Obviously, you're cheating. You shouldn't do that. But what will happen, what will inevitably happen, is that the prices of the properties in the game will suffer inflation. Because, put differently, what will happen is that the purchasing power of the currency you're holding will decrease as the supply increases. This will happen naturally. There's no centralized organism that's determining that as supply increases, the price, the purchasing power decreases. It's just natural. People get it. They know that, and this is something that holds true on every currency in the world. If it is not scarce, it is not very valuable. On the other hand, if it is very scarce, there's very few of that particular currency, then it is very valuable. And so you can think of every currency in the world in those two terms. So one is the amount of people using it, in the sense of number of people using it and amount being transacted, value being transacted between them. And two is the scarcity of the currency itself. And it took me a long while to understand where exactly currencies derive value from. But if you think about it, these two reasons are why the dollar has had so much dominance for now, because the world, because of different circumstances, or maybe the US, the United States itself, fought its way into the top position in the world and became the world's reserve currency. On top of that, it created the petrodollar, which guarantees demand for the currency. And so, unlike other currencies that enforce demand but can only do so within their own borders, within their own country, the US can actually, is not technically enforced, but it forces, or it is very compelling in the fact that if you want to buy oil, you have to buy dollars. And that drives up the demand of dollars on a worldwide scale. This demand, these unprecedented levels of demand of a particular currency, because this hasn't happened any other time in history where one nation's currency had so much demand all over the world. It hasn't happened. And I think the US was as responsible as it could have been, because what happened was that everybody wanted dollars and everybody thought dollars were valuable. They could print as many dollars as they wanted and nothing happened because demand for dollars seemed unlimited at the time. And we're still in that era, but we're coming to an end, I think, in that sense. Here's where cryptocurrencies come, because and also gold and other commodities that are valuable come into play. Most people think that, well, if there's inflation, then gold should rise in value, and I think we're already seeing that. But what makes Bitcoin different from gold? If you think about it, there's a lot of people, I wouldn't say people, but institutions use gold as, and you can think of it in these two terms again, there's a lot of institutions trading and transacting value, and there's a lot of value being transacted in gold. Okay, it actually happens. It's not something that actually happens daily, but it happens. And two, it is a very scarce asset, so there's only so much gold in the world. Here's where the stock to flow ratio comes into play, so you can see that gold is actually very scarce. So yeah, so gold is something that you think about it in this scenario. And also Bitcoin, because it happens to be very scarce. If you measure it in terms of stock to flow, it's very scarce today. It's going to be even more scarce in the future. That by itself should drive prices higher of Bitcoin. But also the fact that more and more people are adopting Bitcoin and transacting on Bitcoin. And so if this is true, if these two items, if these two aspects make a currency valuable, then you would think that both Bitcoin and gold should rise up in value, all while the dollar starts decreasing in value. Why would the dollar start decreasing in value? Well, I think that there's a multitude of reasons, but one is the fact that the US used to have a prominent role in the world stage. It used to be the police of the world. Many citizens in the US didn't like that, and they've elected now a candidate like Donald Trump. And what he's doing is becoming a protectionist president. He's isolating the US from the rest of the world. He's putting tariffs on everybody else. And at the same time, the US is becoming energy independent. So unlike before, where they had to depend on Iran's oil or Saudi Arabia's oil, Today, the US is actually on course to becoming the biggest oil producer in the world. So, as a whole, the US is becoming a much more self sufficient nation than it used to be. And that's fine. Accordingly, it is taking a much more nationalist and protectionist stance in the world stage, and that's fine as well. But what's happening in the process is that the demand for dollars will decrease, and the demand for alternative currencies will increase in turn. And I don't think that people will necessarily flock to the Chinese yen or the euro. I don't think fiat currencies are going to cut it after the world realizes that the dollar isn't as valuable as it used to be. Because it used to be valuable for these reasons, but since the circumstances are changing, it won't be as valuable as it used to be. So I think that what the world will think is, well, what options do we have? And they're definitely going to look at gold. But here's the problem. Unlike Bitcoin, gold actually isn't decentralized and it is not convenient to use. So, because with Bitcoin you can easily transact any amount. It's not very inconvenient. It is very easy to do it. With gold, what you have to do is to put it in a bank, and the bank emits a note based on the amount of gold that you deposited, and you can then spend that note. But then again, that is exactly what the dollar used to be, and it ended up being fiat. So I don't think people are gonna fall for that once again. I don't think so. But I mean, you never know in this. Like, you never know what people might actually do, because I think there are big interests in maintaining control over the currency of the world. But I would think that, logically speaking, that the better option would be Bitcoin, because unlike gold, it cannot be seized. It cannot be controlled. There is no government in the world that can come in and shut down Bitcoin. If you keep your Bitcoin under safe storage, probably a brain wallet, if you keep that, then the chances are no one will be able to seize your Bitcoin unless you give it away. Bitcoin happens to be, in general, cryptocurrencies happen to be a new alternative that the world hasn't seen ever before, at least in digital form, because I read this article that actually there was this civilization that used something like a blockchain, but in actual stone blocks, to keep track of transactions. It worked for a long while, so but it was very cumbersome, obviously. But in digital form, a cryptocurrency hasn't been an option for the world ever. And I think that as the dollar starts to lose relevance in the world, then people will look to alternatives. And they will look into gold, obviously, but I think that ultimately they'll realize that Bitcoin is better at being money than gold. And it's not even somewhat better, it is night and day better. It is it's on a different league. It's much better. I think that spells a very bright future for Bitcoin if all of these things happen. And then, if you believe what I'm saying right now, and then these crazy predictions of Bitcoin start making sense. These crazy predictions were 250k Bitcoin or 1 million Bitcoin. I even heard 10 to 100 million Bitcoins, $1 million Bitcoin. It might sound crazy at first, but I think ultimately people will look back on this period and they will laugh. They will think it was funny that we thought that the government could print pieces of paper and say they were valuable, and that we were deluded into thinking that for so long all over the world. And they'll think, and the only true valuable thing they'll be able to conceive is Bitcoin. But one last thing before I leave is, well, what makes Bitcoin unique among other cryptocurrencies? And I think the answer is very simple. Well, it's one, obviously, the fact that it's incredibly secure. But the fact that it's secure is a function of the amount of people using it and miners providing hashing power to the network. But incidentally, it is actually the network effect itself that gives Bitcoin its differentiating power over any other currency, any other cryptocurrency, that is. The example that I like to use is Facebook as a social network. Everybody now sees that Facebook has this huge business mode. that nobody can compete against. And an example of that is Snapchat. If you realize what Snapchat tried to do is to compete against Facebook, but they're failing miserably. And why is that? Well, if everybody is on Facebook or a Facebook platform like Instagram or WhatsApp or Messenger, if everybody you know and you yourself are on Facebook, then why would you pick anything else? It wouldn't be convenient for you. Yes, in theory, I can make my own social network. I can right now start programming something that, in fact, could even be better than Facebook itself. But in practice, nobody would use it because of the network effect. And I think the very same thing happens with Bitcoin. I can, in theory, right now create another cryptocurrency, but nobody will use it to the same degree as Bitcoin. And by extent, it won't be as safe as Bitcoin, and therefore won't be as valuable as Bitcoin. And I think that over a long enough time horizon, what will happen is that Bitcoin will be king, that there will be only Bitcoin as a currency. There might be other cryptocurrencies, but for practical purposes, practical applications. So, for example, maybe EOS, maybe Ethereum, maybe those cryptocurrencies will have some type of applications, and from there being those cryptocurrencies could be valuable. But the truly decentralized currency will be one, and I think it will be Bitcoin for this exact reason. And I know it might seem crazy right now, it seems delusional, but I will say that crazier things have happened before in the world. The status quo has a way of deluding people into thinking it is stable until reality reasserts itself in often very painful ways. But anyways, guys, thank you very much for listening. These were just my thoughts on Bitcoin. And if you're interested in more of the same, I like doing analysis on stocks and all that. But I like very much Bitcoin, so I just wanted to dump my thoughts on it. So thank you very much for listening. Bye bye.